So, welcome to today's class, and we would continue from where we stopped last time. And in the previous class, we are still implementing this library application. We've been able to complete the users, the inventory, and the borrowing libraries. We've been able to complete it, and now we are moving to the main library management system application itself, and that's the main crate. So during the last class, we could not complete it, and in fact, that would be the focus of today's class. Today's class would be a class focused on completing the full library management system application. We have spent enough time on it, and so it's high time we completed it. So, hi, David. So, from last class, we have implemented the first part, which is the first command to add book. So, I would comment this just to show what we have done. I comment the right thing. Okay, the loop. I think I commented the loop with it. Did I? Okay, let me see. One, two. Okay, these two are meant to be commented. Okay, yes. So just a preview of what we are doing. Okay, let me just put this to the side of what we have done and what we would be doing. So Git. Oh, why am I adding to Git? It's not yet time to push it. So what we'll be doing is cargo run. So for the cargo run, we would now be seeing what the different part of the application that we've implemented looks like. And then we'll be seeing why we are implementing all of these matches, 1, 2, 3, and on like that. So that's what we'll be seeing. Is there a problem with the terminal? Run. Okay, so here's what we have. We have item 1, add book, item 2, register user, item 3, borrow book, item 4, return book, item 5, list books, item 6, exit. So the first thing it does is it asks you to enter your choice. So if you enter 1, what then is the next thing that happens? Since we have commented out the implementation we did, it just loops back to the original point. So now I'm going to get out of this, and then I would uncomment this, and I'll just quickly do a preview on what we worked on. I heard the sound. Okay, is that okay? So, like I said, others that are unable to join us, we just have to catch up with the uploaded video. So for the choice 1, that is the add book. So what we want to do is we want to add a book. So the moment the user chooses option 1, what it does is we are able to read the user's inputs, that's the user's choice. And once we read it, it matches that choice. If it is 1, in this case, we are looking at 1, which is add book. What it does is it first prints out on the console, enter book detail, then it prints the book ID is what. Then next thing it does is once you pass in what the book ID is, it trims it and stores it here in ID. Then it asks for the title. And once it asks for the title, the next thing is it receives it, that this std out dot flush allows you to type in something, that's to type in your input. Then we created a new variable where the title is stored, and then it reads this input, and then it saves it into this variable. Then we ask for the author, then we do the same exact thing to the author. Now, after we've gotten all of what we need, then we create this book struct, and then we pass in the ID, the title, the author, the genre, and if the book is available, we pass in all of this to it. And then what we do is we call add book. So add book would be called from the inventory, this function add book. With this, we've been able to use this method on this inventory add book here. So then we print book added. Then the next thing we were working on was the second command. Okay, I'm listening. You have a question? Did you raise your hand?
Yes, I do. So I wanted to ask a question. I don't know if this the read line that you used for that STDIO, it's for the terminal, right? Like it's reading what the
Exactly.
correct.
That's what it's doing. It's literally reading in what you typed in here. This IO column std out dot
Can you hear me?
flush dot unwrap. Yeah, I can hear you. You
Okay.
said, what is this read line doing? This read line. You're asking what it's doing, right? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Cogsy? Oh, our network is out. So that's basically what the read line does. So now what we are going to do is we are going to continue from where we stopped. And right now, the first thing we do is we ask the user. Okay, she's back. So did you hear what I was saying, Cogsy?
No, I didn't hear you. What you say?
Okay. So I said, looking at this read line, what it does is it literally reads what was passed in here. This dot flush allows a user to type in an input on the console. That's on the terminal. You get. Then we are storing whatever it types in here, and then we are trying to read it on this line. We created
Okay.
this new variable where it will be stored. Then we are trying to read it from here, and then we trim it and keep it. What?
Okay. Yes, sir. You're going to share this code, right? I was thinking if you could like comment, make like one or two comments about it so that when I'm just like reading through it, I can easily know that okay, this is done here, this is done there.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Input. Then new variable created. Then on this line, reads input from terminal. And then this literally trims it, converts it to, let me say, trims and converts it to the right data type. So did you get that?
So I also have one more question, please.
Sure.
I've made a research about it, but I didn't really understand it. What's the difference between using unwrap and using unwrap or like it's two different things?
The truth is, what both of them are trying to achieve is they are trying to get out or destructure an option enum, or in some cases a result enum. You get, you are trying to unwrap it because an option enum would return something like sum and then inside parentheses the data inside it. You get. Now, what unwrap does it basically just unwrap it. Now, in a situation whereby what you are unwrapping, there is nothing inside it, this unwrap will return an error. But if you use this unwrap all, what it does is it unwraps it. Now, in a situation whereby there is nothing there, it literally returns whatever you pass in as a default. Here, I'm passing in 0 as a default. So it returns 0 as the default.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, great. So I would continue with the lecture now. So now we have name, and so we have printing name. We've requested for the user's name. What's the next thing we want to do? The next thing we want to do is std out. Okay. Hi, Francis. Welcome. So the next thing we want to do is std out dot flush. What is flush doing? We are telling the user, okay, type in the name. That's the book name. We've literally typed in. We've requested for the data for the book ID. Now we are telling the user, okay, what's the name of the book? Remember from our inventory, yeah, for a book, all the things that will be in a book is, okay, this is user's detail. We are working on user's detail. I mean, so everything that will be in the user's detail is the ID, the name, and the borrowed books. So let's go. So for the name, we've asked the user to type in the name. So we are going to create a variable name, and this is where we'll be saving the name. So now the next thing we do is we are going to read what is here that the user has typed in. So to do that, it's still same thing we are doing. std in dot read line, and then we pass in the name, then we dot unwrap. Then now, since we have the name and the ID, what's the last thing we need? Oh, did I remove it? Yeah. What's the last thing we need from here? We need the vec. So for that, it's a new user. So what we are going to do is we are just going to create an empty vector. So for that, we say let user equals user, and then the fields, we have the ID, then the name. For the name, we are going to trim it, that's dot trim, and then we convert it to a string, dot to string. Then the last part is borrowed books. So for borrowed books will be a new vector. So this becomes vec new. So now we have user detail. All we then have to do is use a method to add the user. And what method are we using? Register user. So for that, we are going to say user manager dot register user, and then we pass in our user. Then after that, we print out to the user that hello, user has been registered. User registered. And that's all for the second part. Now, the third part, which is the third command. What again is the third command? Coming here, the third command is borrow book. So to borrow book, we are going to get some information for someone that wants to borrow book. We are going to ask the person, okay, you want to borrow a book? Let's use print, okay. So we say, hello, enter the user ID. I mean, if the person is not part of, is not registered in the library, I mean, you should not be able to borrow a book. So to enter it, we say std out, and as usual, we use dot flush, then dot unwrap, we unwrap it. Then we create a variable. And what is this variable holding? Is holding the user ID. String name. Now, it's holding the user ID. What then do? We read the user ID. That's IO std in. So std out is more like the opposite of std in. Dot read line. And then what are we passing in? We are passing in the user ID that we just accepted from the user. Then we unwrap it. And then we create the variable name again by adding the variable type in front of it. And in this case, the ID is a U32, and so user ID dot trim, we trim it and pass it, dot pass dot unwrap. That is unwrap or 0. Then our default is 0, and that's that for entering the user's ID. So now, to borrow a book, where is borrowing library? So this would give us glimpse of what we are doing. So to borrow a book, we need to have the user's data and the book ID too. So the next thing we want to do is the book ID, because as you can see here, we need the user's ID, and the book ID. So the next thing we do here is to ask the user to enter the book ID. So we use print. We print it out to the user, hello, enter book ID. So what's the book ID? And then the next thing we allow is, okay, print. We ask them to type out the book ID dot flush dot unwrap. Then we create a variable, basically. Create a variable and we name it book ID. And string new. And next thing we do is std.in. That is, we are now trying to read what the user passed in for the book ID. Is literally just the same thing that we've been doing before. std.in line. I notice the sound is someone asking a question. Okay. So oh, I noticed that there was a problem. read line. Yes. And so for the read line, what are we passing in there? For the read line, we are passing in book ID. So mute book ID. ID. So book ID dot we unwrap it. Dot unwrap. Then what's the next thing we do? We create it as a variable, book ID. What type of data is it? U32. So is equal to book ID dot string dot pass dot unwrap, or we use 0. Now, what we are going to now do is we now want to borrow the book. Now we've gotten the user's ID, we've gotten the book ID as we can see here. Now we want to use this borrow book function, borrow book method. And so we are going to use all the data we've gotten here. And so for that, we are going to use a match inside here because this is going to result to either success or an error. So let's try to match the two situations, if it's success and if it's error. So match, we are borrowing the book, and we are going to be using the borrow service dot borrow book, dot borrow book. And for that, we'll be using the inventory, obviously, that we created, and mute. And this would be and mute, okay. And then the user ID. Then for this, we then will be creating an OK, an empty OK, and then we would be printing it out. If it's successful, we will say book borrowed successfully. Now, the second situation whereby there is an error, we are going to print the error out. Now, we don't know which of these errors would probably happen, whether the book is not available or the user can't borrow more than 3 books. That's a situation whereby it's coming to borrow more books. So for that reason, we print out this error. And what would the error be? Print. And the error would be error. And we pass in the error. Error. Literally. And with that, we completed the third part that says borrow book. So with this, you can borrow book with this. So the next stage we'll be going to is number 4, the fourth command. What's the fourth command? The fourth command is return book. I hope everyone can see my screen and my screen is not frozen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So the next command is return book. And so we are going to be implementing, okay. We are going to be implementing the next command, which is this. So for that, we're going to ask the user to print in their user ID. Obviously, the first thing, as you can see, what are the things we need here? We need the user's ID and the book ID to return a book. So yeah, we're going to request for these 2 things. So we're going to tell the user, enter user ID. Then the next thing, we are going to literally do the same thing we've done before, std out, since we are literally getting information from them, dot flush, dot unwrap. So with this, the user's entry will be passed in. So the next thing we are going to do is to create a variable. We're going to create the user ID variable. All of these things looks like I have done them before, but I'll just quickly redo them as it can be seen here that I've done them before. So maybe I'll just, in fact, copy this. But it's always not too good to copy your code. So you don't have problems when you are writing the code, or you don't basically replicate problems. So, but we are quite certain of this. So we're going to copy this too. It's literally the same thing because we are just trying to get the ID. And the same thing happens for the book ID. We are also going to ask the user to enter book ID. We are going to tell the user to enter book ID, and then same thing. We are going to use the same method that we are using to get the user's data dot unwrap. And yes, this. Then the next thing is we create a variable as we've done before. And the variable would be book ID, basically. That's the book ID, string new. And yeah, then lastly, we would do the normal thing, which is to basically accept it in. That's to read it, and that's using std in. And we are going to read it, read line, std read line. And for that, we're going to add the book ID dot unwrap. We unwrap it. We unwrap it. And lastly, we are going to recreate the variable so that we can basically have the data in the exact data type we need. Because what we have here is a string. And since we've read it, the next thing to do is to pass it in and use it as the exact data type we need. So for this, we're going to say book ID as usual dot trim. We're going to trim it, then say dot pass. We pass it dot unwrap all. So we use dot unwrap all. Our default is usually 0. So the thing we did earlier is what we'll be doing now. We'll be using this return book method we have created. And so in this case, we are going to say, okay, do we have a problem? Okay. So, okay. Are we having a problem? It's saying std, okay, expected mutable reference and found this. This is the exact reason why I said it's not wise to copy code. But I can see the solution here. We didn't add this parentheses to this new year. So next is borrow. We use borrowing service because borrowing service is where this return book is. Okay. I noticed the sound. Okay. So borrowing service is where a return book is. So we say dot return book. For this, we add, I'll expand the screen. For this, we'll add the mute in front of it. And basically that's it. So we are matching it. And so the first thing we are matching it is actually an okay. And if it's an okay, what should it do? It should print a success message. And what's the success message? Book returned successfully. But if there is an error, what should it do? Basically, still print the error. and it's just going to be the same way we printed the other error. It's the error coming from this thing we'll be using, print error. Okay, so, and we have this. So we have a problem from here. So what's the problem? Cannot mutate immutable variable borrowing service. Why can't it mutate it? Where do we have it here? Oh, we didn't add it here. Okay. So with this, we can say we are done with the fourth implementation, and that's the implementation to return books. So we have just two left. That's the implementation to list books and the implementation to exit. So to do that, we would go to number 5. Number 5. That's matched to the 5th option. So for that, the first thing we want to do is we want to listen to all the books. We want to list all the books, I mean. So for that, we would print out listing all books. And then let's add this there. And then we do a for loop. So we say for book in inventory dot list books. Then we want to print out something. What are the things we want to print? First of all, the ID, the title, the author, then is the book available? We want to know if the book is available. So you should print that too. Then where are the things we are printing? We say book.id, then book.title, then book.author, then, okay, did someone raise? Okay. Book.author, then book.is available. Okay. So with this, we have our 5th implementation. Our 5th implementation of printing out the books. Now, the last implementation, which will be the 6th one, would have this: print in exiting. And then we break the loop. So that's the last command. So if a situation whereby we now add in a wrong input, what happens? Well, in that case, we have to handle that situation too. That's where we would have this: print this invalid choice. Please try again. With this, I am happy to announce that we've completed our full library management application. So I guess the obvious thing would be for us to see what we have built and test it. So to run the program, we use what we normally do, cargo run. But before I move on, is there any question? Or is it clear up to this point? Any question? Okay, great. So I would cargo run. And so, good. I would clear this. I actually want everything to be clean. So I'll do it again. Cargo run. Okay. So for cargo run, can we see library management system? And we have our first option, add book, register user, borrow book, return book, list book, and exit. So we are told, enter your choice. Okay. What we want to do is we want to add a book. So we enter one. Now, the next thing is enter book details. So what is the book detail? We were asked for the ID. What's the ID of the book? Let's say the ID of the book is 10. What's the title of the book? Let's say The Runaway Boy. Who is the author of the book? Okay, the network. Who is the author of the book? Let's say Ayomide. So, as we can see, book added. How do we know that this book have been added? We can go to the option 5 again that says list books. So if I enter 5, can you see the book? ID, it said listing all books, ID of 10, the title, The Runaway Boy, the author, Ayomide. Is it available? True, it's available. So let's add another book. Let's say add book in, enter the book ID. This time, let's say the book ID is 32. What's the title of the book? Rust book. Who is the author? Let's say Steve. So the book has been added. So let's now see list all the books. So let's see if that book has actually been added. So we are going to click on list all the book. Can you see the book added? The first one is ID of 10. The second one is ID of 32. And the one of ID of 10 has the title, The Runaway Boy. It has the author, Ayomide. Is it available? True. The other one, ID of 32, has the title, The Runaway, the Rust book, I mean. Then the author, Steve, available? True. So our code is working perfectly. We can see that we are able to actually add a book. Now, let's now see a situation whereby we register a user. So let's go to the second command, enter your choice, 2. So what's the user's detail? Let's say the user's ID. We were told to enter the ID. The ID is 1. So we've entered the user's ID. What's the name? Let's say the name is Festus. Now, user registered. So I've been registered with ID 1 and Festus. So now let's borrow a book. Now in this case, we are going to try to borrow a book with a particular wrong user ID, a situation whereby the user that is trying to borrow the book has not been registered. Remember that for ID 1 is we registered Ayo. We registered Festus. So now let's try to borrow book. So enter user ID. So to enter user ID, we are going to enter 2. enter book ID. We are going to enter 2. Notice that the book ID is also wrong. So what are we going to get as a return to us? Error, book not found. Can you see? Book not found. That's because the user ID and the book ID we entered is wrong. One of the situations whereby we entered the right book ID, but the wrong user ID, what happens? So let's try to borrow a book again. We enter choice 3 and enter user ID. Let's say the user ID we still use 2. And then the book ID, we have a book ID of 10 there. So we enter 10. What error did we get now? User not found. So we were able to handle different errors at different time. A situation whereby a user has not registered, a situation whereby the book is not part of the library or the book has not been added to the library. All of these errors, we handled it effectively. So is everyone following me? Can I get like a thumbs up if everyone is following me? Okay, great, great. So now we have tested register and add book. We've also tested the errors that is returned whenever we have a user ID that is wrong or a book ID that is wrong. Now we want to actually borrow a book. And if we borrow the book, we want to then see if we can borrow the same book again. So to do that, I'm going to create another user. So the first user is going to borrow that first book, and then the second user will try to borrow the same book. What then happens? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to test our application. Is there any breakage? What happens when we do this? Are we able to handle all situations? Everything we've just done here is a CLI tool. All we've done in the code, you can literally translate it and integrate it to a front end, and the application will be working perfectly. But so that we can all see all our implementation work as if we are looking at it from a UI, that is exactly why we implemented the CI here and the CLI here. So for this, we are going to register another user. What's the user's ID? Let's call the user ID 2 now. What's the user's name? We can say Nomad. Now, Nomad has been registered. So in this case, the first user is going to borrow a book, and then let's see if Nomad can borrow the same book. So we are going to enter 3, enter user ID of 1, enter the book they want to borrow, 10. Book borrowed successfully. So this user has been able to successfully borrow a book. That's user with ID 1 has been able to successfully borrow a book. Now, what happens? What happens when another user tries to borrow the same book? Now we are going to enter 3, enter user ID of 2, and then enter book ID 10. Can you see? Error, book is not available. So because user 1 has borrowed the book there, now that user 2 is trying to borrow the book is not available. Can we see that our code is working perfectly the exact way we want it to work? So the book is no longer available. Now, what if user 1 returns the book? That leads us to the fourth command, return book. So what if user 1 returns the book? Can user 2 now borrow the book? Let's see. So we are going to click on 4, enter your choice 4 to return the book, enter user ID 1, enter the book ID we want to return, 10. Book returned successfully. The fact that the book has been returned successfully, can this book now be used by another user? Let's try to see. So we are going to call on the borrow book now. Enter choice 3, and enter ID to borrow a book, we are going to enter the ID of 10. User ID, no, we are going to enter user ID of 2. Book ID, we are going to enter 10. Can you see? Book borrowed successfully. So user 2 can now borrow this book because the book is now available and has been returned by user 1. So that is exactly a situation that shows that our code is working perfectly. So now that user 2 has borrowed the book, user 1 cannot borrow it because user 2 is still with the book. So one thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to quickly add 3 more books or 2 more books. I'll add 2 more books and then I'll try to borrow more than 3 books, and then I'll see if a user can borrow more than 3 books. And then we'll see the error if we are able to undo that particular error or if we undo it. So borrow book, we enter, not borrow book, add book, book ID, let's call it 2, book title, I shouldn't have even added random book IDs. Random book IDs, okay. I'll just literally list it out. So enter book details, the tall boy. Then author, we say still Ayo. Now we also want to register one more book. So add book ID, let's say 3 this time. Title, the short boy. And then the short boy, author, we still say the author is Ayo. So now in this case, let's try to list out all the books we have actually registered here. And in this case, I'm going to try to list them out by using the fourth command. Okay, not, oh. What happens whenever we try to go back? Now I've entered something I really do not need, but then what happens? So I'm going to just randomly enter some wrong things and I'll get the wrong information that says error book not found. But in that situation, we could have created another command that leads us back to this particular interface. That leads us back to this library management system. A command whereby, okay, once you enter a particular command or you enter a particular choice, then it leads you back. So for this, we are going to now click on 5. Now we have all our books. The first book is The Runaway Boy. The second one is The Rust Book. The third one, The Tall Boy. The short one, fourth one, The Short Boy. So user 2 have actually borrowed the first one. So user 2 will try to borrow this and this. And let's see if he is able to borrow this again. So for this, we are going to enter borrow book. That's command 3. The book ID we want to borrow, or the user ID, I mean, user 2. Then the book ID, we borrow 32. So he has successfully borrowed this book again. So next again, we want to borrow again. User ID 2. Book ID we want to borrow. This time we are trying to borrow book ID of 2. Notice book borrowed successfully. So now the last one we want to check is ID of 3. So we are going to enter borrow book. So enter your choice, borrow book 3, user ID 2, and then the book ID we want to borrow 3. What happens? The error. User cannot borrow more than 3 books. You see our code is working perfectly. So now a situation whereby the user returns a book, that's command 4, enter the user ID 2. He wants to return a book. What's the ID of the book you want to return to? So can you see? Book returned successfully. Now with this, can the user actually borrow another book? Then we enter the command borrow, user ID 2, book ID 3. Can you see? Book borrowed successfully. So we can literally say our code is working the exact way we want it to work. So this is basically how we come to the end of the library application we are building. And I don't know if there's any question. The next class would be involving a last lecture on Rust. And after that lecture, we are moving on to, we were meant to have that lecture yesterday, which has been moved to today. But because we had not completed this application we are building, we had to move that forward. So that lecture would be on Monday, and after then, we would then have our introduction to Soroban smart contracts. And the introduction to Soroban smart contracts would definitely mean we are getting into building Soroban smart contract and deploying on Stellar Network. So the interesting thing now is, at this point, with what we've built and with what we've done, each person should be able to write a minimum application with Rust. If you feel you are still not strong enough, the tutorial videos are definitely there for you to go back and check on whatever you need to, to remind yourself on, as we discussed on so many things, from traits to structs and different data types and all of that. So go back, all the classes are on YouTube, and you can basically, get information about it and remind yourself on the class. So if there are no questions, I would stop sharing my screen and I will stop the recording. Thank you to everyone that was able to participate in the lecture today.